to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome back. It's Wednesday, March 18th here. We are back on the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast, and by back, I mean Borg and Betz.
You never left. You're always here, Kyle. And, normally come on, I tell you guys how much I love the show and how the suits are always very busy and they don't have time for us. I got to apologize to the people, man. I'm so happy to be here this week because there was a 24-hour period last Monday at about 3 a.m. in the morning till about Tuesday night at 9 o'clock where I didn't know if I would make it. I didn't know if I'd ever come back on the show because let's just say I was best friends with my toilet. Goodness gracious, man. That was brutal. I missed you guys last week. I would have rather been anywhere else than where I was for a solid 24 hours. But the guys held down. Andy got to come on the show, which I know people were excited about. He made his, once per year appearance on the Dynasty podcast. So missed you guys last week, but it was a good show talking about free agency and all that good stuff. I love free agency. And I was so bummed that like every time there's something that happened in the signing, I would like look at my phone and be like, okay, cool. And then sprint to the toilet and go puke.
That was your drill?
Not because of the signing being bad, but just, man, the stomach bug was horrendous. So I hope everybody out there is staying healthy. I don't wish what I had on anybody, not even my, worst enemy. So brutal, but happy to be back.
We were this close to just giving your spot away for the company, of course. And in your exit interview, you would just said, like, he just didn't have the grit. He just couldn't show up when it was needed.
I really didn't. I was soft physically, mentally, emotionally. It was so bad. It was like one of those things where our 1.5-year-old got it the weekend prior, then one of the twins got it, then my wife got it, and somehow I was like, I'm feeling good. Went to bed, woke up, not feeling good. And somehow our other twin, fingers crossed throughout this entire time, hasn't gotten it. But yes, it made its way through the Betz household and it was nasty.
That is the joy of being a parent or a parent of kids that go to school and they come back and you're like, you are sharing with everybody in our house. So on this episode, we are going to look at the next tier of wide receiver prospects for this year's NFL draft. We went through the top 5, and I think this is where it gets interesting. And I'm just going to bring up a tweet from Daniel Jeremiah. And he said this, he says, I feel like a sweet spot in this draft is between picks 50 and 75. If you need an edge rusher, a cornerback, or a wide receiver, you will find somebody graded in this region. So a lot of the wide receivers here are going to be day 2 picks. And in your rookie drafts, you are staring down the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, and there's a lot of wide receivers that feel like I don't know how to sort out them. And so this episode is for you, if you have one of those picks, to say, hey, what am I doing at the 111? Or I'm at the 203, and there's like 5 wide receivers. I don't know the difference between the two. I could tell you some facts, but for fantasy, how are they going to translate? And I would say this group, more so than the others, like everybody has their own role that like can work in the NFL. So none of these guys were going to say like, okay, you're absolute trash. But for their specific team, that's why they might be drafted. For fantasy, there's a big difference between what is Malachi Fields, what is Zachariah Branch, and what is Chris Bell. And I think that's the conversation I want to have.
I think there's a large group of this wide receiver room, or not room, but this kind of second, third-ish tier, maybe even fourth tier. You're going to see a lot of these guys go on day 2 of the NFL draft. And of course, that should have our interest. It's like, okay, we know draft capital is very important. But then you go down the line of like, well, how important is it? Because every single one of these prospects, you can poke 3 holes in at least. And a lot of these guys, quite frankly, I'm just not very into. So the NFL will be into them for the role that they will fill for what the offense is looking for, what the coaching staff is looking for. And when I say I'm not that into them, I of course mean for fantasy. That's what we're doing here. There's a lot of issues with these guys that kind of go here. So this wide receiver class has been built as, hey, it's pretty deep. If you don't get one of the top 2 or 3, like you can probably get one on day 2, and that guy can play some snaps for you. But over the course of time, we know that historically there's a lot of busts that go in that day 2, day 3 range. And there's going to be a lot of pick your flavor, pick your favorite sleeper in this class type of guys, because there's not really one guy that I'm like so excited about outside of the first round prospect. So even though it is built as a deeper wide receiver class in general, I think it is extremely top heavy and then kind of falls off from there.
One of the parts of my process is, we go from like the analytical side, we watch the film, we talk about it on this podcast, we still need draft capital. But like as I'm building that process, I have, for each player, I write down if there's a red flag that pops up. And some of those are like statistically like, man, you didn't command a ton of targets. That's something we talk about a lot in college. Or, man, this is a contested catch only guy. That's a red flag. That's not the only thing that we should be paying attention to. But I don't want my entire process to just be, well, he went in the third round. And, that's just where he goes. Like Isaac Tesla, you could look at him last year and be like, whoa, he went in the third round. That's so wildly different than all of us projected for him. He had the lowest targets per out run of any player taken in the first 3 rounds over the last decade. And so we kind of build on that process. And you saw it this past year, the touchdowns were there, but he was targeted on like 8% of his routes. So that's something that you get to add in as opposed to, holy crap, this player was taken in the second round. This is just where he goes in rookie draft. So we'll talk about that. I know we still have a month or so leading up to the NFL draft, but make sure you're creating a process with these guys, that you're not just taking one tweet, one video, something Betz threw out there just to, trash a player and his family as the only data point.
Kyle, I only put the good stuff out, okay? Come on. Like the Miami Dolphins depth chart.
Yeah, especially that. We're going to react to Jaylen Waddle. I feel like that is something that's really fresh on Dynasty minds. And while corporate is out this week, I figured if we didn't do it, then people would be begging the fantasy footballers to say something, and they would just be silent. Just completely silent, not wanting to show up to work.
There's going to be a lot of people to listen. Where's the Jaylen Waddle reaction? What do you got? Come on, this is huge news. They will have it for you whenever their meetings are done. They have to crunch the numbers, get the spreadsheets going, get the business meetings, fly back to Arizona, all that stuff. And then they'll have the reaction. But I'm excited to talk about it today. It's a very fun trade, man. There's often trades like that kind of happen at the start of free agency, and information and news is hot and heavy. There's been a lull for like 3 or 4 days outside of the random 1-year signings that everybody's getting. And it's kind of bad when you get to the point in the free agency window, which technically we're still in, when the agents don't even report the number anymore. They just say 1-year deal because the number is not worth reporting. But we got some huge news yesterday with Jaylen Waddle headed to Denver, which is really, really fun. I did have I don't want to say privilege, but the opportunity to update the team opportunity charts in the Ultimate Draft Kit. Goodness gracious, man. How is Malik Willis going to succeed as an inexperienced quarterback without a lot of dropbacks thrown into this group? Now, of course, they will probably address the position multiple times in the NFL draft, so it won't look the exact same. But as things stand, Kyle, is it Jalen Tolbert wide receiver 1 season? Is it Terrace Marshall Jr.?
That's what I wanted you to say.
Wide receiver 1 season. I mean, if he's out there, that is a nasty boy to pick up on your roster, which I know you would never do because he's already on there.
Yeah, no, if he's not on your Dynasty roster, are you actually playing? I think the bigger point, as opposed to just saying that Terrace Marshall Jr. was quietly signed, like, we're pointing the fingers. Why was he signed a couple months ago?
Oh, you Windhorse meme in this?
Yeah. I mean, you tell me. What's going on? The depth chart's bad with Tutu Atwell, Malik Washington, Jalen Tolbert, Terrace Marshall Jr., Theo Wees. Like it's pretty rough, and you should not be putting in target shares for any of those players right this second. I think Malik Washington is the easiest because you've seen him on the team, but I'm not making any dynasty moves related to Dolphins pass catchers getting the ball from Malik Willis and trying to be bullish on it. You're going to see instant reactions across the board of arrows up for this player. It's just, this is going to be a bad passing offense apart from maybe Devon Achane seeing 90 targets. And I think the bigger question when we look at the Broncos, because with Jaylen Waddle, he's 27 years old. He's entering his 6th year in the NFL. I think we're kind of asking the question, can he get back to being a top 15-ish wide receiver? And you saw early on, he had 100 catches as a rookie, and the next year is when he put up the really good numbers opposite Tyreek Hill. And since then, if you play the Jaylen Waddle game, which I have him in Dynasty, it's like when you're on the field, this is fun. You get off the field every game, at some point you're hurt, and then I don't really know when to start you. And now we're going to a completely different offense. So contextually speaking, I cannot use Jaylen Waddle stats from 2 years ago with Tua and that offense and say this is exactly what's going to happen. He also just runs very different routes than what the Broncos have done. The Broncos ran a ton of screen routes last year, especially for Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. That was like over 8% of the routes. Waddle was at 1% last year. So you have to change your expectations. But my bigger question is, can he get back to being a top 15 wide receiver? And then we'll talk about him in terms of dynasty value.
Yeah, he's been so frustrating in Dynasty the last couple of years because there has been this like 2 to 3 year window where it's like, this is a great trade target. All the underlying numbers are like, this guy is still very talented. The first down per route run, yards per route run, all those things have kind of always been there with Waddle, and we saw the early production. So as Dynasty players, we hang on to that, and then you hang on to it, and you hang on to it, and then eventually you're like, well, what do we do here? I'm still a believer. I mean, even last year with the issues that Tua had at quarterback and the Dolphins had in general, he was 8th in first downs per route run among qualified wide receivers. He was 12th in yards per route run. So this is still a top-tier talent at the position, and you go from a quarterback that literally could not throw deep functionally last year in Tua to Bo Nix, who, yes, he has his issues. He has some accuracy problems when he gets out of the pocket, but he can throw the deep ball. And so I do think you add that explosive element back into Jaylen Waddle's game. You get a very creative play caller here in Sean Payton. The frustrating thing for me, and I do love the fit across from Courtland Sutton. I think the two pair very well together. The frustrating thing with Sean Payton is like, there's going to be multiple times this year where randomly Lil Jordan Humphrey is seeing 3 targets a game, and Troy Franklin will come on the field, and Marvin Mims will be in there. And of course, you have to give a design target to Nate Atkins with the game on the line. Like, he will just do weird stuff like that. So that's obviously very, minute and focused on one specific aspect of this trade. But all in all, I like the fit. And the other thing with the Broncos is comparing them to how they played to the Dolphins. The pace metrics are so different too. So I think you'll have an upside for more play volume with Bo Nix in this Denver Broncos offense than you had historically with Mike McDaniel, which always relied on efficiency, but was very slow and methodical. So all in all, I mean, obviously it's an upgrade from a systemic standpoint. The Broncos were on the cusp of the Super Bowl last year. So I like it. If anybody out there in your league is kind of down on just Waddle frustration of recent years, like even with this trade, it'll probably cost you a little more than it did last week. But I'm buying. I think this is a good spot for Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, we traded for Waddle in the Main Ballers Dynasty League last year. We gave up a first, and then it was part of a package deal. But really, the core of the deal was like a late first is what it ended up being. And nice. I feel like now it's going to cost you a mid first. And I was putting him in context to this year's wide receivers in rookie drafts, because that's really what we always want to do. When we talk about trading a first-round pick, we're saying, hey, would you rather have Waddle at 105, or would you rather have, Denzel Boston or whoever else it is in that exact... Waddle. So yeah, I would rather have Waddle. I'd probably rather have Tyson, Tate, and Lemon, but I think I'd probably put him fourth in that group.
I agree.
Okay. Last little thing I'll mention is that Bo Nix was really, really, really bad in the intermediate area of the field. And looking at passer rating, the only quarterbacks with the worst passer rating in the intermediate area of the field were Geno Smith, Bryce Young, Cam Ward, and Shadur Sanders. It's not a great list.
Not great.
But I look at some of the routes that Franklin and Mims were running last year. There was either screens or go routes, which is a weird combination to basically be like all or nothing. And you think of Waddle as that player, but a lot of his stuff, like his bread and butter, has always been like out routes, hitch routes, because he has the speed that can, test defenses, but then he can come back and run these kind of curl routes. So I like him. I did find out that Nix and Waddle, the last time that they kind of played against each other, was that 2019 Iron Bowl, where Waddle had 3 receiving touchdowns and a 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So I'm sure Nix was like, dude, last time I really played this guy in that way, he killed us. I want him on my team. They also have a new play caller this year in Davis Webb. So I'm not using the Broncos offense from last year as a template, because it's going to change.
But, I mean, Sean Payton is not going to
He's gonna
completely give up the
plays.
Keys. I'll tell you what to call, but you are the one that's allowed to say it into the headset. There's no way Sean Payton's giving up full control of the offense. So I think you'll see a lot of the same concepts. But it is a fair point that there is at least some chance it's not the exact same. But overall, I think Payton will have his fingerprints all over this.
All right, I'll give you a couple of names to compare. Jaylen Waddle, who's 27 years old, or Zay Flowers in Dynasty.
I've always loved Zay. I still think Waddle is the more talented player.
All right.
Give me Waddle.
All right, I would have Waddle as well. All right, fellow Alabama alum Jamison Williams, 25 years old, or Jaylen Waddle?
That one's tough. I will go Waddle, but it's very close.
I think it's very close too. I think it wouldn't shock me if JMO ends up with more touchdowns, but Waddle's better for fantasy.
It's possible.
In terms of consistency. All right. So we kind of settled on where we're at in terms of rookie picks, like around the 105-ish, 106. But I have one more name I need to throw out there because his name has been thrown around in so many trades. Diana Rossini's getting paid to just say this out loud. So would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or A.J. Brown in Dynasty?
Can we just stop for a second and recognize that this is her Super Bowl, June 1st, baby. Like, if he is not traded at some point around June 1st, goodness gracious. Mike sent this to me because we have a bit going back and forth with like reporters and beat reporters and national reporters. We love you guys. We need the information. We love it. But it's so funny how like you can tell how some tweets are kind of molded to be like, the agent told you to say this and we all know it and you're getting paid for it and that's fine. And I wish I could get paid for that stuff. Don't get me wrong. But like the Rossini, AJ Brown stuff, this woman has been tweeting about AJ Brown's trade for approximately 278 days consecutively. And I love that like the second this news broke, it was like, well, this is not related to AJ Brown. Like you could still be dealt. It's like, goodness, woman, give it a break. But with that being said, it's still possible. And if I'm the Eagles, like, if you're trying to at least see if this is a Super Bowl roster still, they're losing some pieces defensively, wouldn't you just like hold AJ Brown and see how it goes? And if they're 8-2, then like, great, keep riding it. And he's doing well. If he's struggling and you're not where you were 2 years ago, trade him at the deadline. Like they're not in any rush to do this, in my opinion. And with this trade, his price tag continues to rise because it's like, if Waddle went for a first, Howie's not going to trade him for anything less. So I think he probably remains on the Eagles for now, but there is like that kind of hidden upside with Devonta Smith that if he does get moved the summer or in season, then obviously that would be a huge, huge boost to his outlook.
You do realize the Eagles are on the pattern right now of Super Bowl. Next year, they hate everybody and they hate their OC. Then Super Bowl with Kellen Moore as their OC. Next year, they hate each other. So this year, new OC with Sean Mannion. You tell me what happens.
Hollywood Brown, Super Bowl champion.
Hollywood Brown. Last little thing I'll say, you mentioned the agents putting out tweet stuff. We are about to get into the season where this team really likes this player for the NFL draft. And what that really means is the agent of this prospect told whoever to tweet this out because an NFL team would be stupid to say out loud that they like a player that is being graded in the 3rd round. We really like this guy. It's smoke. It's pure poppycock, as they say. Don't love it.
Who says that?
I don't know. Kids.
They do.
Kids from yesteryear. They used to say it that way. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. We went through the top 5 rookie wide receivers for this year's NFL draft, so let's keep going.
Hey, rookie. Welcome to the NFL.
All of the prospects that we've talked about on this show and previous shows are found in our Dynasty Pass, including full scouting reports. There's also rookie profile articles live on the site. I know you just did one with Carnell Tate, and I'll mention a couple other ones, but there is so much more to this discussion than just what we can do on a podcast. So if you want to continue that conversation, ultimatedraftkit.com, you'll get it in your app. It's right there. Scroll on the toilet, figure out everything you need to do from there. But we talked about Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, Denzel Boston, and Casey Concepcion on the last rookie prospect show. And we're going to start off by talking about a pair of Indiana wide receivers. I'm going to try to go in order of where they are in mock draft database. But these Indiana wide receivers, I feel like we had to have a conversation of them together since we were watching a lot of the same film. I did a deep dive on Fernando Mendoza. I did a huge article on him. So these are kind of the guys. But let's first start with Omar Cooper Jr., redshirt junior out of Indiana. It's an interesting rise for a player that's kind of been the hot name over the last month. So before we get into the analytics, do you feel like he's like the guy this year you've mentioned before, like kind of Ekbuka, where it's like, okay, this guy kind of feels like he could be in the first round, to a month from now, this guy's surely going in the first round?
It sure seems like his floor at this point is like the 35th overall pick, doesn't it? Like maybe he doesn't sneak into the first round, but it seems like when day 2 starts, if he doesn't go round 1, his name will be called pretty early is what it feels like. And I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you start to see a lot more Omar Cooper Jr. mocked in the first round, which I totally understand. Like, he does have an NFL-ready skill set, in my opinion. Super tough after the catch, very, very good. Can play inside, outside as far as that, missed tackles forced. Like, he is kind of a guy that his game should translate to the NFL. And you look at kind of what he did with zone yards per route run, like over 3 yards. We love that. So I think there's a lot to like about Omar Cooper Jr. as far as how he fits in the NFL and his ability to get on the field pretty much right away, just because of that inside-outside versatility. The problem I have is just like every year there's like a guy that is like trendy and kind of hot, and the guy that's the late riser. And it's like, man, if we just rewind basically a year ago, nobody was talking about this as like a round one NFL talent, like that type of guy. And obviously you should leave your mind open to changes over the course of time. It's just that I see a guy that's good, not great. And I fear that if he does get that first round capital, because of the kind of sleeper hype around him, he will be a guy that potentially is overdrafted, not just in like rookie drafts, but maybe even in like dynasty startups too. So I like Omar Cooper Jr. I definitely question some aspects of his profile though, for sure.
One of the things we have to deal with every single year is the players that make a run in the college football playoffs. They're just going to see a rise. It's going to happen every single year because there's more exposure, there's fewer games, and all of us are like, wow, this team's really good. And you can't really argue with 13 touchdowns from him. We'll talk about Elijah Sarratt, 15 touchdowns. Like, oh, well, these were the players on the national championship team. But going back to before December, he was routinely being mocked outside the top 100 picks in the NFL draft. So that's just the context that you need from where he went, 3 months ago to where he is now. When you look at what he excelled at in Indiana, you go back to his junior season or his sophomore season, he was redshirted. It was like when they needed a big play, this dude made it. 24 of his 28 receptions that year went for a first down or a touchdown, which is just insane. He led the Big Ten in yards per catch at 21. And actually, if you dive deeper that year, like the production's not crazy. 28 catches, 594 and 7. Kirk Cignetti actually like challenged him that year on his dependability. And you saw this year how crucial he was to this team. Some of the biggest moments, including against Penn State. It's like he was such a big deal for what they were doing. The hardest part for me is he played 84% in the slot. And then the year before in 2024, he was 90% out wide. So instead of trying to say this is a slot only guy based on last year, I think you pegged it very early. Like there's versatility there that NFL teams will like. And I don't really like the Debo comps too much. He's just not as big. But DJ Moore is one of those players who kind of has had an inside-outside role depending on which team, Carolina, Chicago, now with Buffalo, where it's like he could pretty much do anything you need on the field. That's kind of been my favorite comp so far, just to kind of peg him.
Dude, we have to stop doing the Debo thing. There's no Debos. Debo is one of one. There will never be another Debo for what he did. And I understand why people do that because it's like, who do you think of the tough bully yak guy? Okay, that's this year's Debo, which he does do. Like he is very tough after the catch, a lot of contested grabs, and you think he's going to go down. He breaks a tackle and he's off for 10 or 12 yards. So that's what I was saying. Like his ability to kind of work the intermediate area of the field fits today's game, and then his ability to create after the catch fits today's game. I do think he might start his career as being somewhat volume dependent. Like you're not going to be able to give this guy 3 to 6 looks like down the field. You're hoping for a splash play like you would with Carnell Tate, for example. That's just kind of not how he historically has won, though he did see targets kind of at all 3 levels. So all in all, I like him. My fear, though, is just kind of like the Mike Washington thing at the running back position this year. It's like everybody has that one guy that they attach onto that they kind of just shoot up the draft boards and they go along for the ride. I feel like at the wide receiver position this year, that guy is Omar Cooper Jr. I like him. I don't necessarily love him.
If you look at his route tree, it's really confusing to compare what somebody did in college with this to the pros. 28% of his routes were screens, which is pretty high. And then 17% were outs. And those are just very confusing. The only wide receivers just in any sort of range in the NFL that played that role in the slot was like Malik Washington, Chimere DK, who's a very fun kind of yak specialist, and Xavier Worthy. And so those 3 players, that they can hit the big play, and yet there are times where they're just erased from the offense. So I don't really know where he fits in. I do love his after the catch stuff. One of my favorite phrases I've been using is he's an agent of controlled chaos. So when he gets the ball, it looks like he's out of control, but really like he's the one creating all the chaos around him, forcing missed tackles. He does have some numbers that are boosted by, like he had a game against Indiana State, the Sycamores,
Of course.
Larry Bird's team, where he went 10 for 207 and 4. That's going to change stuff. When you play in 15 games, that also will change some of your counting stats. So I don't really care so much for that. I care about the zone yards per out run stuff you brought up, 3.03. He's going to work in zone coverage. He's tough. I like that. He just doesn't feel like a first-round pick to me. And maybe that's like me looking at where he's been and what can work in the NFL. So it will be interesting to see how he is used, his route tree. I feel like his acceleration isn't like elite in and out of his breaks, but just like put the ball in his hands and see what happens. But I don't feel comfortable with him at like 106, which is kind of where he's going right now, 106, 107 in rookie drafts.
Yeah, that's kind of the price you'll have to pay if you want him on your roster, most likely, assuming he does go in the first round. So that's what I was saying. Like, if you have that pick and he's the trendy hot name and everybody wants Omar Cooper, like I'm cool to flip that pick when I'm on the clock in my rookie draft for an established veteran of something of similar. We just talked about Jaylen Waddle. I don't think you're getting that done today, but like, I don't know, when you're on the clock and Omar Cooper is there at 106, I'm willing to find out if that can get done. Something like that. That's obviously shooting for the moon, know your league, but I guess my take home here before I move on is there's a lot to like. I think we both see some overall issues with kind of where things went to where they are now and kind of how his game might, eventually be in the NFL. At the same time, there is something to be said for, hey, you are playing next to also an NFL talent. Elijah Sarratt is going to get drafted in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft, most likely. And if he does, that's also a strong signal for Omar Cooper Jr., who produced pretty good numbers next to a potential NFL player.
All right, let's move on and talk about Sarratt. Senior, 6'2.5", 210. Bigger dude. Interesting story as a 0-star recruit out of high school. Went to St. Francis, a Catholic school. Then your alma mater, JMU. So he was a Duke.
Go Dukes.
Then he was at Indiana these past 2 years with some insane touchdown production. Okay, 15 touchdowns led FBS. He's nicknamed Waffle House. Omar Cooper gave him that because he's open 24/7, which, hey, I'm from the South, man. It's part of the culture. It's part of the staple of who we are.
I've never eaten at a Waffle House.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
I saw someone say this the other day about Waffle House. Is like, every restaurant wants to have some type of promotion or new thing. Waffle House just stays in its lane. It knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to be anything different. It's actually not great. It's just, it's what to depend on. I took Truman the other day before school, and he wanted a chocolate chip waffle. He got a chocolate chip waffle. It was great.
I will say, I was thinking about this. I'm like, man, they don't really ever promote anything ever.
You don't need to.
But this past year, because of the fantasy punishment thing, they did the Malik Neighbors one, which is actually very good. Great commercial.
That was IHOP.
Oh, that was IHOP. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Waffle House. I get my national chain breakfast restaurants messed up here. Waffles versus pancakes. Wow, that's
It's
gonna
okay.
get some people mad.
I just need to make sure. I need to say this. I am very anti-International House of Pancakes. And I'm talking like, I will never go back there again. Even if they paid me. I worked there for 6 months in college. That's why.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right.
So he's called Waffle House because he's always open, huh?
He's always open. Elijah Sarratt. So he didn't test at the combine. And because he's not the fastest of players, he did run the gauntlet drill. If you go back and watch it, it looks slow, man. And every wide receiver does that differently when they're running down the line. But he dropped one. He looks slow. His pro day is April 1st. So Indiana's pro day is going to be one of those things where he's going to look great off the charts. But the thing that is crazy about him is he's just a first down machine. 54% of his career targets turned into a first down. So it's just like over and over and over again when they needed big plays, he was available. And the biggest thing is the back shoulder throws between Mendoza and him were like spot on. He said in some of his interviews that like we watched a lot of Rodgers and Devontae Adams, and that part of his game is already elite. It's already great. In the NFL, that looks a little different, right? When you're doing back shoulder throws, teams know and teams understand. But his dependability, showing up in big games, is just something that like stands out in this class. He's more crafty as a route runner than slippery, but like good football player. You want him on your team. He's a winner. The question is for fantasy, I don't really love to translate like touchdowns like this in the NFL, it's just hard for me to say this is going to work the same way for a wide receiver.
For sure, yeah. 15, 8, and 8 touchdowns over the last 3 years. The touchdowns are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for kind of the dominator rating and stuff like that. So I think he's a solid player, nothing special athletically, but understands leverage, body control, good hands. And you mentioned that kind of back shoulder type stuff. It's interesting you brought up the Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers back shoulder throw type of chemistry they had. I think an interesting kind of comp for like how this could work in the NFL, and this sounds horrible and disgusting right now, but there was a period of time where Allen Lazard was okay for fantasy, not the most athletically gifted guy, but like understood position, understood where he had to be for his quarterback, could catch everything, and was a solid possession flex guy for fantasy. And I think that's possible with a guy like Sarratt. So I will say the fact that he's always open per his teammate, Omar Cooper, not a big fan of PFF because if you check the contested catches and contested targets, they would say otherwise, Omar. I did think that was funny. Almost 30% of his career targets were deemed contested per PFF. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. It just invites a lot more variance. Like we've seen the hits with like guys like Cortland Sutton and some of those types. Even Nico Collins, right, developed from being just a contested guy to now he can do a lot more. To the downside of like Keon Coleman, it's not really working. So there's a wide range of kind of how this could go. But I will say that I don't necessarily agree with always being open, and I think the numbers will agree with that. I think this stat was kind of crazy. This is from Dynasty Zoltan FF on Twitter. 1/3 of Elijah Stroud's targets at Indiana were deemed contested. Of 200 drafted wide receivers since 2018, only JJ, I believe we're saying Arcega-Whiteside,
correct, has
a higher contested target rate. Generally not the list you want to be on. It's one data point. It's not everything, but I will say I feel like you said, that it worked in college does not mean it will definitely work in the pros, and that's a question mark I have with this guy.
I'm glad you brought up the spectrum of contested catches because there are guys like Michael Pittman Jr. or Drake London, I'm thinking about USC players, who like that was their calling card there, and they've kind of morphed into being volume guys in the right offense, in the right schemes. But if you look at the NFL, just 10% of catches over the last 4 years were contested catches. So when we say this player is really good at contested catches, we're like, okay, well, this is like a 10th of the volume in the NFL. Like it's fine, but it's not the main thing. And the catch rates are 50-50 balls. That's usually what they are. In the red zone, it's even lower for contested catches because the field's condensed. So I like Sarratt. I don't feel like he offers much after the catch. He ran a ton of slant routes. It was 20% of his routes this past year. That's off the charts. Like nobody else in the NFL is really over 15%. So something's going to change, but I think he's going to keep slipping. Like his draft stock's actually gone down as Cooper's gone up, where right now he's around 70th on big boards, but he's going to end up probably being in round 3, which makes him a mid to late second round rookie pick.
Most likely, yeah. Before we move on, I do want to point out and just kind of give him a little hat tip. Like, it's not hard to go, or not hard. It is hard, I should say. And we don't want to overlook the fact that he went from St. Francis to JMU to Indiana. And every time, like, the level of competition got more difficult, he continued to produce and put up pretty significant numbers. So there is something here, but I think we both agree there's a wide range of outcomes. And certainly you can understand and kind of see where the downside case happens.
All right, next wide receiver we're going to talk about is Chris Brazzell II out of Tennessee. His dad, Chris Brazzell I, was briefly an NFL wide receiver. 7 career receptions.
7 total?
7 total. He was on the Cowboys. I looked at his, PFR profile for about like 15 seconds.
So he has NFL bloodlines, is what you're saying.
That's if you want to hear that, that's what you're hearing. So started off at Tulane, was at Tennessee this past 2 years. The constant criticism we've had with Tennessee is that their offense hasn't really produced wide receivers that can translate to the NFL. Jalen Hyatt's been the recent example, Cedric Tillman, Velus Jones, if you want to call him a wide receiver, where what they ran at Tennessee doesn't really work. And he actually went on record during the combine saying, hey, I just want you to know that we ran a different style of offense. Still Josh Heupel as the head coach, but it was a little bit more traditional from those Hyatt and Hendon Hooker years that we saw a couple years ago. And this past year at Tennessee, 62 catches, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's a really big target, and he kind of has an unusual body type, 6'4", 198. There haven't been many wide receivers that have been that tall and that skinny over the last decade. The names that show up is like A.T. Perry. Remember him from a couple years ago?
I do.
Dante Thornton Jr., also from Tennessee last year. MVS, who I think he's going to get comped to a lot. So there's a lot of context with Chris Brazzell and trying to figure out what he is at the NFL level. But I just want to say, before we get any further, I went in being skeptical, and I've watched Tennessee football, and I came away thinking, like, I think he's more than just a deep threat.
I think he's more than a deep threat if you zoom out and look at some of his stuff at Tulane. I mean, at Tennessee, a lot of his targets, especially the ones that made, the highlight reel, were down the field. I will say, like, for a bigger guy, I just kind of saw him getting bullied out there on the perimeter more than I would
pushed
like.
Around?
He's like running on the sideline at times, like the cornerbacks using leverage because they line up so wide. There's not that much field, and if you just push him to the boundary, you cut off the entire field from this guy. And that happened a lot with him. So I think this is a guy that has a wide range of outcomes. Like, could develop into a deep threat in the NFL, could also develop and kind of do some of the Tulane stuff and have a nice marriage of that. It's going to take a very, very thin needle to thread to get there. I don't know. I'm not in love with him, quite honestly. I do think that the body type of being that tall, long, rangy guy that has shown an ability to see targets down the field, NFL teams like that. That does not necessarily mean that will work for fantasy, and that's kind of the place that I'm at with him right now. Is I've kind of pegged him as a guy I feel like will most likely help his NFL team more than he helps our fantasy rosters, is the most likely scenario that will happen.
He is interesting. He has a pretty quick release off the line for someone his height. He can win in zone. That's what's interesting to me, is in zone, over the top, and in the intermediate area with his hitch routes. It works for somebody that you normally wouldn't think. The NFL is paying a premium right now for wide receivers who can get over the top. The Alec Pierce, you just saw his market skyrocket because it hasn't worked that often in the NFL recently. Like, we saw the lowest 20-plus air yard touchdowns over the last decade this past year. So there's a short supply of guys who can do what he does, which is why I think he can end up in round 2, as high as round 2. His hands aren't great. He has 12 career drops. And despite that size, he just didn't face the type of press coverage that you think, like Malachi Fields, who we'll talk about. It's like, this guy's going downfield. You need to get your hands on him. 45% of his routes were either posts, goes, or crossers, which is exactly what Alec Pierce did, Darius Slayton did, those kind of guys. I think there's a little bit more to his game. And the game against Georgia, by the way, he was the dude that day. He won the jump balls, the 50-50 balls that day. So I like Chris Brazzell more than I thought I would. And I don't mind taking a shot in the right environment, in the right passing offense, as long as he's not drafted to see a ton of volume. Like, he's going to probably do what Pierce did, which is see very few targets in year one, catch maybe 1 or 2 deep balls, and then hopefully can develop into something more. But a 4.37 40 time at 6'4" is pretty nice.
The unfortunate thing, though, is Kyle, is that doesn't really matter for fantasy. And we know that. This is a guy that averaged 2.09 career yards per out run.
You just
I'm just not
watch
into
the
it.
tape, brother, as I always say.
I'm not into him, if I'm being honest.
That's okay. Let's go to Chris Bell. His draft stock has actually gone down since his injury, ACL injury in November against SMU. But before the season, Dane Brugler, I went back, had him as his number 2 wide receiver coming out. So there's a lot to like about Chris Bell and what he could be. He only played 11 games this past year, but the dude is a tank. He played with Tyler Shuck the year before at Louisville. Interesting name. He is the, quote, heaviest wide receiver that participated at the combine that weighed in. I just thought that was a fun fact. Heaviest dude. And you can tell me this part. He was told by doctors to potentially return by training camp. I don't know anything about the timeline. Is that just doo-doo? Is that just they're just spewing whatever they want?
There will be multiple reports, I feel like, over the next, it's mid-March, the draft's end of April. Over the next 6-ish weeks leading up to it, that's like, you will see a letter of approval from whoever a surgeon was that says he will be ready for training camp and all those things. It happens every year around this time with these prospects that can't test and do all the things they need to do. It's possible. He won't be 100% entering week 1. And so we kind of talked about this on the mock draft, I believe we did with Jason, I think it was, where we talked about him, and it was like, I kind of like Chris Bell. Like, I kind of like some of the stuff he does. You get him on crossers, get him after the catch. He's really, really exciting on those types of plays. And there's also some moments where he's winning on the boundary. So, like, I can kind of see it. I will say, analytically, there's a lot of issues here with this guy. It didn't really break out till his final year. Now you have the injury. The problem I have, though, with these guys is just in general, you think about, like, how you view players in Dynasty. So much of their value is tied to what they do in their first year. We're so quick in this game we play to bury players or crown them, right? It's just what we do. It's kind of the way the market goes. And so now you've got a guy that has red flags all over his analytical profile, now coming off an ACL. If you're just learning the ropes in training camp, the train's already left. Like, NFL coaches and teams aren't really going to wait for you to build their game plan around you. So then you're saying, maybe this guy sees a handful of targets in October and November, and perhaps he's fantasy relevant in December. And then we're entering January, February next year, and we're saying, nobody knows what Chris Bell is, right? So he's a guy that I'm just kind of like letting the NFL tell me kind of what they value him as, because there's no NFL draft data information, all that sort of stuff. And teams are just going to kind of have to go off what they saw the last year at Louisville, which there were some good moments. So I do like him as a player, but like I said, from a dynasty value perspective, which if that's how people prefer to play the game is kind of the market analysis, you might be able to just like trade your 205 next year for him and not have to worry about burning the late first on this year. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be market price aware of Chris Bell, although I do like aspects of his game.
It would be an interesting, proposition right now if you put in a reminder for yourself for like November, December. Hey, that just says, you'll probably forget that you did it. It's just, hey, what is Chris Bell? And if he was brought along slowly, if it took longer, whoever the manager is that drafted him might say, hey, no, I want to see where this is. You also might find a manager that's like, hey, like, this was not a good pick in the second round of my rookie. So you can either acquire him then at the trade deadline as like, he could be a rebuilding piece, or you could trade for him next offseason. So put a little reminder in. I'm going to do that just to see, like, who is Chris Bell? That's probably what I'm going to put. 60% of his targets, though, were between 0 and 9 yards. So that short area of the field, that was the highest in the class. And you see his yak ability as kind of his main thing. His speed, like, I wouldn't call him fast, but I would say he has the build-up speed to get fast. For those out there that play Mario Kart, it's like Bowser. You're going to build up speed, and eventually you're going to be a freight train that nobody else wants to tackle. Watch the Virginia game. I feel like he just bullied them over and over. Like, nobody wanted to tackle him. And I also wrote that he plays more like a power forward, small forward, than like a pure wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see what the fit is. A lot of curls, a lot of crossers. And then mostly outside. Like, that's another thing. It's like, how are they going to utilize this guy? Is he going to get to play some big slot stuff where we've seen guys in this mold? I'm just going to say it's very Treylon Burks-esque. Big dude who gets manufactured touches, build up speed, and it took a while in the NFL to figure out. Like, it's a lot of Xavier Legette. And then if I had to give a high-end comp at all, it's like, you're thick, you have the ball skills of A.J. Brown. And I don't think he can be A.J. Brown by any means, but that's the type of player you're getting on these slants and these kind of hitch routes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That kind of Legette-esque comp makes a lot of sense, even analytically, right? It's like, if you remember the conversation when he came out, it was like, Jason, I remember, told everybody, he's like, do not listen to me. This is not good advice. But when I watched this player play in the SEC, this dude is dominating. And he didn't do anything, right? For like 4 years, took his fifth year. Chris Bell, sub 1.8 yards per out run the first 3 years of his college career. Like, early production wasn't really there as far as a huge signal. So it happened late. But like I said, like, you get him on a crosser moving before the snap and stuff like that, like, he will run away from players. So I kind of feel similar to kind of how I felt about that, is like, deep down, especially coming off injury, this probably won't work. But I see like a sliver of hope for kind of where it does. So I think he's a fun player, some really fun tape, but more of a developmental kind of stash in this group than a guy that you're hoping to get production out of in year one.
I did see that he posted that he had a pre-draft top 30 visit with the Bills, which is part of our processing. If you weren't around this past year, we tracked all the top 30 visits. We put out a bunch of data about what was predictive and what it said about each team and stuff. So I'm excited to figure that part out this year. I feel like that was a data point that we were lacking, and it's not always like he visited with this team. It's more of saying, what does the team want to use their draft capital? What does it say about it? So that would be an interesting fit for that team as a bully player. So let's take a quick break. We'll talk about some more wide receivers. Next name we're going to bring up is Zachariah Branch, wide receiver out of Georgia, 5'9", 177 pounds. And if you want to have a good time, go watch some Zachariah Branch high school film. He was the number one wide receiver in the country and posted some pretty insane track and field numbers too, including in 2023, he was recorded on a treadmill sprinted at 26 miles per hour. For context, Usain Bolt's record is just over 27 miles per hour. So this is like Olympic track speed for Zachariah Branch. Really fun player at USC as a freshman. I mean, his first game, he was the best player on the field with Caleb Williams. So those are some really fun. But as we've progressed, he was at Georgia this past year. He had 81 receptions, which was a school record in terms of seeing volume. And yet we have to bring up the very, very big point that this is a lot of screens, a lot of low ADOT stuff that generally speaking, we don't love for fantasy.
For sure. Yeah. You mentioned some of that USC tape. His return game, insane. And this dude's an athlete. Like, you just get in the ball, figure it out later kind of player. That's kind of how he's generally been in college. Like you said, so much of his stuff is the manufactured screen behind the line of scrimmage, volume type stuff, which like in PPR formats, like could work. The problem with Zachariah Branch and the way the NFL is trending with this heavier personnel type stuff is this guy is 5'9", 177 and highly, highly, highly unlikely to play on the perimeter, especially in the first year, probably the second year too. So you're telling me this is a slot-only guy in a league trending towards multiple tight ends, heavier personnel type of packages. How many snaps is this guy even going to play is the question I have. And then from there, can he actually be an NFL wide receiver? Because he wasn't really asked to do that at Georgia. And so many question marks. You can tell yourself a story where he's fast, electric, dynamic, playmaker. But we've seen this story so many times, right? We get so intrigued by the what if this guy could be this guy could be that. I think we all know this probably won't work, if we're being honest. That's how I feel. I think he will contribute right away on special teams for an NFL franchise and be dynamic and electric at that. But for him to turn into anything more than a gadgety slot-only player would be an outlier. Historically, betting on those guys has not worked. So not say you don't have fun and throw a dart in your rookie drafts. I just think we need to be realistic with kind of what to expect here from Zachariah Branch.
Yeah, just a couple of numbers. 77% of his receiving yardage came after the catch. So a lot of stuff Betz was talking about. He did crush man coverage, 4.23 yards per route run. He's a playmaker. I want to ask this question because I'm in step there. It's easy for me to make a bet against Zachariah Branch for fantasy. I would love to have him on my NFL team. I would love to have him for our Falcons, just as like he played at Georgia, fun player. I said, so how can Zachariah Branch work in the NFL? Because I know how it won't work in the NFL. And when I asked that question, how could it work? The best example is like, is he just a souped up version of Wan'Dale?
Wan'Dale is probably the 90th percentile outcome.
Is he?
This player.
And Wan'Dale saw a ton of volume at Kentucky and just got a second contract that's really big. Just saw 140 plus targets back to back. It was the context though that was needed for Wan'Dale, which was a really crappy, Giants organization that kind of kept this dude on the field forever, and Neighbors getting hurt this past year. So it really had to play out that way. That's really the best case scenario I can paint. I mean, a lot of people are bringing up Tavon Austin, who the Rams took with the top 15 pick. In my rookie drafts, I will probably let somebody else take Branch.
Me as well.
But in my PPR only slot, low ADOT league only, number one pick.
Don't forget about those return yards.
Let's bring up Germie Bernard of Alabama, or as Jason called him the week before, Germie. And Germie Bernard, I've kind of run the gamut with him and trying to figure out what he is. He started off at Michigan State on the same team as Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed way back in 2022. His first college reception, 44-yard touchdown. That was some cool film the other day. Then he went to Washington and actually drew more targets than Denzel Boston. He was part of that Michael Penix Jr. team. Goes to Alabama. And this past year, his final year, 64 for 862 and 7. I feel like we were kind of waiting for him to be the next Alabama wide receiver, and it just doesn't pop off the page the way I want to. I think he can be a very, very good NFL player, and I loved this comp I saw the other day. Like, the highest end comp I could give him is his versatility and what he can do on the field, getting some, snaps in the backfield, is what Robert Woods was in the NFL. It was like, you could do it all for the Rams. Are you really an elite player? I don't know, but you're a good football player that McVay knew how to use, but I don't really know what he is.
He's an interesting player, Germie, He has some signal in his profile. Like, look, this guy was on a Washington offense, 3 years ago that had future NFL players, and he was actually carving out a role. It's like, he must be at least somewhat talented. Goes to Alabama, which just nobody is of Alabama. You have to be talented to do that. So there's some signal there. He follows, DeBoer, and it's like, you're kind of waiting for him to like take the jump, and it was just fine, mostly. I think he's a player who's good at a lot of things. I don't think he's like special at any one thing. And so when I'm thinking about him in the NFL, it's like, I can see him working as a wide receiver 2/3 for an offense and maybe being like on the flex radar for fantasy. I do not think, from what I saw and kind of analytically, this is a player you could ever really like build your offense around, is how I feel. So I view him as like a high-ish floor player in rookie drafts. I don't necessarily see a huge ceiling here, if I'm being honest. The one thing that I do love about him, this guy is ultra reliable. 4 drops on over 200 career targets in college, so he has great hands. He can play inside, outside. He also got some involvement out of the backfield, which is sometimes a signal of talent. So there are some aspects where you squint and you're like, okay, I can kind of see this. At the same time, this is a player who averaged 1.7 yards per route run as a 22-year-old senior. So, not ideal. So all in all, I think the NFL will like him. I think there's some signal in his profile. It's like, hey, this could work. He'll have a role. He could be productive enough to kind of be a flex type guy. But by no means do I see this guy turning into a fantasy star.
He's more quick than explosive. I think he can create separation. So it'll be interesting to see where he fits in an offense. And I think he's one of those players that if he gets taken on day 2, if he has the right landing spot in an offense that's like, okay, we needed a wide receiver 3 in our offense right away. This guy's young. He can develop over time. That's what, I hate using Robert Woods as the only comp, but like him in Buffalo was not like a big deal. And it wasn't until he got that second contract with LA that he was like turned into a fantasy force for a while. The numbers you mentioned are not great. When you talked about the yards per route run, as a 22-year-old senior, that final season would be the second lowest of any wide receiver taken in rounds 1, 2, or 3 since 2015. The only one lower, and I need to repeat, the only one lower, was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles like the biggest idiots in the world in 2020 with Jalen Reagor.
That's Eagles legend, Jalen Reagor, to you, sir. Okay, watch your mouth.
I don't have much as a Falcons fan to like hold over your head, but Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson is just one of the greatest moments of all time.
Who went after Kyle Pitts in the draft?
That's obvious.
Who was that?
Jamar Chase. We didn't need him, man. We didn't need Jamar Chase. So I think with Germie Bernard, when you get in the second round, I'm letting the team fit be the kind of the differentiator.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. We're going to talk about Malachi Fields of Notre Dame. And I can just tell you right now, Betz would love for this to be a 10-second conversation.
I don't see it, man. I really don't. This is a 5-year player who in 2023, like kind of started to show like he peaked, and then it was like, it just never really got better. And historically, 5-year players that have limited elite production is a major, major red flag. I also think this is a guy that when you think about kind of how he wins, it's like classic X receiver, go in down the field, we'll throw you a jump ball and kind of hope for the best. That just is not what today's game is in the league. So again, X receiver who has value in the NFL, would be absolutely shocked if this works for fantasy.
I think I've seen this movie before, and he's more of a bully than a wide receiver, but he's like stiff in his route running. He's not quick. He might be the least quick. What's really the best way to say that? He's not
like
quick.
A turtle?
He's just not.
He's just slow?
At the line of scrimmage, man, he gets messed up by press coverage, which is weird for a guy who's a contested catch guy. I will add that at the Senior Bowl, Daniel Jeremiah called Fields the best wide receiver of the entire week of practice. So good week of practice. Don't hold that against him, Betz. It's just really hard for players with this type of production to then translate. He was targeted on fewer than 22% of his routes. the best comp I can give in terms of size, production is Keon Coleman, but this is like the older, slower version. That's like what we're getting of this player.
I mean, Keon was an athlete, at least.
It's not ideal. And I even said, like, if I had to be really, really like 99th percentile, this is Mike Williams, but the coupon version. And I like Malachi Fields as like a person. I really like his story is really compelling, but I will let somebody else take this type of archetype of player.
That's how I feel. Yeah, this is 3 or 4 weeks ago, but there was a moment where it was like he was kind of getting a little like, could this guy sneak into the first round buzz? And I was like floored. I was like, I don't understand. What am I missing here? But now it kind of seems like rational, heads are prevailing, and we're kind of falling back away from Senior Bowl hype, which the NFL draft cycle is this, right? It's whatever's happening lately. And of course, he goes to Indy, runs 4.6, and everybody's like, uh-oh. And so now his stock is falling again, right? So it's just, you have to kind of go with ebbs and flows here. He'll be a day 2 pick. He'll fill an extra receiver role in the NFL. Does that work for fantasy? Most likely not. So I'm with you. This is a guy that I will be lower on than consensus.
All right, one more name here is Antonio Williams, wide receiver out of Clemson. He's a redshirt junior. Did play all 4 years. He got hurt in his sophomore year. And he was just a consistent performer all throughout college on those Clemson teams. Even in high school, you go back, and he won 3 state championships. He lost just once in high school, same high school as Jalen Hyatt, the Dutch Fork Silver Foxes.
Did they play on the same team?
They did not. They did not overlap there. But what's interesting about Williams is he was a freshman All-American in 2022, and then in 2024 put together an awesome campaign, 74 for 902 and 11. And what you need to know is that if you're picking from your slot wide receivers this year, there's tiers for NFL teams. There's Mekhi Lemon, who's the obvious name. Omar Cooper Jr. is up there as well. But Antonio Williams saw 93% of his routes in the slot. So he's kind of that next tier if you're looking for a slot wide receiver. And he's bigger, or at least taller, than you would imagine for a slot wide receiver.
Yeah, for sure. The same thing I kind of feel about Branch applies in some ways here. I'm not saying these guys are the same players, but the kind of overarching theme is like NFL moving to 2 wide receiver sets or heavier personnel sets, limited the number of 3 wide receiver sets in the last couple of seasons. If that continues in year 1 and year 2 for Antonio Williams, how much does this guy even get on the field? So I think a taxi squad type of guy that you're kind of throwing a dart on in rookie drafts. I will say, if you're looking for like signal, it's like, oh, you went to a legit program and produced right away as a freshman. That has some signal to it. He also was used in the run game as well. That has some signal as far as talent on his depth chart of saying, coaching staff, let's get this guy the ball. So I can kind of see it with Antonio Williams. It is going to take a very thin needle to thread to make it work for fantasy. He has to develop into more of a consistent 2 wide receiver set guy, and they just didn't show us that at all at Clemson. So that's just a major unknown question mark. Can it translate into the NFL? Most likely, probably not. But again, you're thinking about more of these developmental guys. Antonio Williams kind of fits that bill for me. A guy that I will, throw a dart on in the late 2nd, maybe early 3rd, stash him on a taxi squad and just kind of see what happens in the first year or 2.
You mentioned the breakout age, 19.1. That's 5th best in this class. A lot of his routes were crossers or screens, which is pretty typical for a player who plays in the slot. But I think he just looks pretty comfortable in the middle of the field, in zone coverage, and he has the short area quickness to me that he was just open a ton. He's explosive in like getting off the line. I like my comp, if I was really kind, it says like he's a diet version of what Christian Kirk was really good at, which Christian Kirk did progress to be able to play outside as well later on in his career, but he's not a burner. He's probably not going to do very well against press coverage. So at the end of the day, like you look at a player like this, like if you're not going to get on too wide and you're not going to block for those teams, then you're missing out on a ton of routes over time, despite how reliable you are. So you need to be in the right spot on a team that is in 3 wide all the time. And maybe you carve out a role the way that Josh Downs carved out a role with the Colts or somebody like that. But it's hard to say, like, I'm pounding the table for Antonio Williams. I think he's going to be a good NFL player and have a high floor long term. Ceiling-wise, I'm not, like, saying you have to take him at the end of your 2nd round.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel pretty similar.
Okay. There's lots of other names that we will have highlighted and discuss over the next couple of weeks. And in the Dynasty Pass, we will have scouting reports coming out for names like Skylar Bell, which is actually in there right now, Deion Burks of Oklahoma, Ted Hurst of Georgia State right here in good old Atlanta, Brennan Thompson, Mississippi State, Bryce Lance, Trey Lance's brother, who is now signed back to the Chargers. Did you see that?
I did.
I mean, that's huge news.
They signed their QB1.
So there's lots of names that are going to be added to the list. And I just want to say, of this group, I kind of like Skylar Bell.
Dude, of course you do. It's like he's like the trendy sleeper guy.
Give me production final year, and you're tougher than people realize.
Yeah, I'm with you. Give me the production. Deion Burks is so weird, man. There's like some NFL kind of circles that like kind of are into him, but I'm just like, I don't understand. Like,
that's a great way to describe that. There's people that are kind of into that stuff, and I'm not really into that scene.
I'm not into that, man. I don't go to those meetings. I'm not there. I don't know those people. But when you look at his complete kind of profile and totality, it's like, I don't know here. But the NFL loves speed. They always love speed, and he did run fast at Indy. So we'll see. But this is what I was saying. Like, there's some interesting names that kind of are going to go in like the third-ish round, but you really have to squint hard to see it for fantasy.
That's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you check out the Dynasty Pass at ultimatedraftkit.com, and we'll be back next week to talk some more.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.